Hello. My name is Poppy. And this is how my sister stood up at a family dinner, smiled at my mother, and said she was pregnant with my husband's child. No one gasped. No one defended me. They just kept eating. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how calmly they erased me, how quietly they made room for her to take everything, my marriage, my place, even my father's name for her unborn child. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I was weak. But I had been recording everything. Now tell me. What would you do if your whole family applauded your betrayal? It was one of those soft Texas evenings when the air felt heavy with heat and the scent of barbecue from nearby homes. My mother's house sat at the end of a quiet street lined with oak trees, a picture of calm that didn't match the storm I felt brewing in my chest. Family dinners used to feel like comfort to me, good food, familiar laughter, the kind of easy warmth that meant you were home. But lately, these gatherings had turned into performances. We smiled too long, spoke too carefully, and left the truth outside like an unwanted guest. I parked in front of the house and stayed inside my car for a few seconds, hands still on the steering wheel. Something felt wrong. Theron had been distant for months, always working late, always checking his phone. And my sister Celine, she had been too cheerful, too available. I told myself it was paranoia, that I was tired. But tonight, that quiet unease sat behind my ribs like a ticking clock. Inside, everything looked the same, Mother's china cabinet gleaming, the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the smell of roasted chicken and her favorite candle burning too strong. There she is, Celine said brightly when I walked in. She looked perfect, as always, her hair falling in smooth waves, her smile wide and controlled. Theron stood beside her, his arm brushing hers as if by accident. "Hi," I said, forcing a small smile. Mom, Vera, gave me a quick look. "You're late, honey." Her tone was clipped. It wasn't the first time she'd used that tone lately, the kind that said I'd already disappointed her somehow. We sat down at the table. My cousins were there, an uncle and his wife, all chatting about weekend plans and mortgage rates and the usual small talk that fills empty spaces. The plates were arranged neatly, and I noticed how Celine had taken the head of the table tonight. Normally, that was Mom's spot. When dinner started, I tried to listen, to fit myself into the rhythm of the room, but something about the way everyone's eyes kept flicking between Celine and Theron made my skin tighten. Celine had brought dessert, she never cooked, and her laugh was louder than the rest. Theron smiled, not at me, but toward her. I wanted to ignore it, but even the air seemed to lean in their direction. Halfway through the meal, Celine tapped her glass with her spoon. The sound was light, deliberate. Conversation stopped. She stood, her hand resting on Theron's shoulder. "I have something to share," she said, her voice steady. "Something important." Everyone looked at her, smiling, expecting some kind of promotion or good news. I stared at her hand on my husband's shoulder. My stomach twisted. She took a breath and said it clearly, almost casually. "I'm pregnant. And it's Theron's." The words didn't sound real at first. They just floated there, hanging between the clinking plates and the smell of coconut rice. Then the room fell silent, heavy, alive with disbelief. My fork slid from my hand and hit the plate with a sharp sound that broke the stillness for just a moment. Theron didn't say a word. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look at me. He stared at his plate like a man praying for it to open and swallow him whole. No one moved. No one said, "That can't be true." Not Mom, not my cousins, not anyone. It wasn't the kind of silence that waits for words. It was the kind that agrees by saying nothing. I remember looking around, hoping to catch a single sympathetic face. Instead, I saw eyes drop, shoulders shift, lips pressed together. My mother picked up her wine glass, her expression unreadable. Celine smiled faintly, as if she'd rehearsed this scene. That's when I knew it wasn't an accident. It wasn't impulsive. It was planned. I sat back, my heart knocking against my ribs. The sound of the ceiling fan filled the space where outrage should have been. Celine sat down next to Theron, and he didn't move away. "Are you out of your mind?" I finally whispered, but it came out too soft, like I was asking the weather why it rained. No one answered. Mom's fork scraped her plate. "Let's not make a scene," she murmured. That sentence landed harder than Celine's announcement. Not make a scene. Like the scene hadn't already been made. The humiliation burned under my skin, but I kept still. I saw my uncle clear his throat and glance at his wife, who looked down at her food. The cousins busied themselves with their drinks. It was as if I'd vanished, turned invisible at my own table. Celine reached for Theron's hand. "We didn't mean for it to happen," she said gently. "It just did." Theron looked up finally, meeting my eyes. His voice came out low. "I'm sorry, Poppy. I didn't know how to tell you." I wanted to scream, but my throat closed up. The betrayal felt too sharp for sound. I stared at the man I once believed would protect me from everything, now sitting beside the one person who'd promised she never would hurt me. The silence stretched. The only noise was the ticking of the wall clock, each second louder than the last. My mother sighed. "This family has been through enough. Let's not turn dinner into drama." Drama. That's what she called it. Not betrayal. Not cruelty. Just drama. Something inside me went quiet then, not broken, just still. I realized in that moment that the family I thought I belonged to had been gone for a long time. I had just been the last to notice. I glanced at Celine, who looked too calm for someone confessing to destroying a marriage. She looked proud. Triumphant even. And that's when I understood, this was never about love. It was about power. I could see the years stacking up behind her smile, every moment she'd felt second best, every competition she thought she lost. This was how she'd decided to win. My hands were trembling, but I hid them under the table. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might crack open. But I didn't let my voice shake. I picked up my glass of wine, looked around the table, my husband, my sister, my mother, all complicit in their silence, and said the only thing that came to me. "I see." I set the glass down carefully, as if control was something I could still hold on to. No one asked what I saw. No one cared. They just turned back to their plates, pretending dinner was still dinner. But inside me, something shifted. Not rage. Not sorrow. Something sharper. A decision forming in the quiet. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. The air around the table didn't shift after I said it. "I see." No one paused to wonder what I saw. They just went on chewing, sipping wine, dabbing mouths with linen napkins as if what had just been said wasn't a bomb dropped in the middle of the dining room. My glass remained untouched. I sat upright, not out of pride but as an act of survival. If I folded in on myself, I might disappear completely, and I was no longer willing to vanish for anyone's comfort. Celine's laughter returned first, light and controlled, as if she hadn't detonated my world moments ago. Theron reached for more mashed potatoes. The cousins resumed their low murmurs. No one asked how I felt. No one looked at me long enough to see the crack in my chest. I pushed my chair back quietly, the wooden legs skimming against the tile. I needed to breathe, maybe just stand outside for a moment, maybe never come back. But I hadn't even cleared the table's edge when my mother's voice cut through the room. "Sit down, Poppy. Don't make this about you. Her tone wasn't sharp. It was worse. It was dismissive. Like I was throwing a tantrum during a piano recital. I turned slightly, catching the flicker of something cold in her eyes. She wasn't embarrassed by Celine's confession. She was annoyed by my reaction to it. Before I could answer, Celine leaned toward me, her elbows resting easily on the table like we were just chatting over coffee. It's not like you two were doing great anyway, she said, soft enough to sound kind, loud enough for the room to hear. We didn't want to hurt you, Poppy. I couldn't speak. Every word that rose in my throat got stuck behind a wall of disbelief. She didn't want to hurt me, but here we were, bleeding out under crystal lighting and roasted chicken. I caught a snicker from the far end of the table. My Aunt Linda, who'd always worn her opinions like heavy perfume, piped up without looking at me. Let's be honest, she said. You've never really contributed anything to this family. There it was. The sentence that didn't just sting, it erased. Years of effort, sacrifice, and silent giving, wiped out with one dismissive breath. I scanned the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to say something in my defense. But no one did. Not one voice pushed back. Not even my mother. Especially not her. I felt something loosen inside me, like a thread snapping. I had spent so long holding everything together, I hadn't noticed how tightly I'd been wound. My mind drifted. Not to rage, not even sadness. Just a roll of memories they'd all conveniently forgotten. The time Vera needed knee surgery and the insurance didn't cover the extra costs. I wrote the check without a second thought. She never brought it up again, not even a thank you. Celine's boutique office, all sleek gold and ivory, every inch of that space had my fingerprints on it. I designed it top to bottom, taken no fee, not even for the hours I'd spent revising floor plans because she kept changing her mind. Theron, he came to me once, ashamed. Said his savings had run dry and he needed a loan to start over after his job fell through. I gave him $12,000. No questions asked. No repayment plan. I didn't do any of it to be praised. I never asked them to recognize me. I just thought that, at the very least, they wouldn't pretend I'd never done a thing for them. Now here they were, pretending. I shifted my gaze across the table, letting my eyes land on each person. Not one could meet my stare. Not Vera, who was refolding her napkin like it held answers. Not Celine, who twirled her fork through her food with the poise of someone who thought she'd won. Not Theron, who looked at me as if I were already part of his past. That's when I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. This was about erasure. They hadn't just turned against me. They'd rewritten me. In their version, I had never mattered. I was the quiet one, the background figure, the extra chair at holidays. I was easy to edit out. It wasn't that they forgot what I'd done. It was that they chose to pretend I'd done nothing. And the worst part? I'd helped them do it. I stayed silent. I stayed small. I thought loyalty was earned by not making waves. I thought love meant giving without keeping score. I was wrong. That clarity didn't feel good. It felt cold and sharp and necessary. Like a bone snapping back into place after being misaligned too long. I reached slowly for my phone, my fingers calm now. My pulse had steadied, not because I felt safe, but because I'd made a decision. I hovered over the folder marked Proof. I'd built it over the last 2 months. Not because I expected tonight to happen, but because something in me had started preparing for the day it might. Bank transfers. Screenshots. Email threads. Signed documents. Dates. Amounts. Names. Not to destroy them. Just to remember that I existed. That I had given. That I was here. I didn't press send yet. That would come later. Right now, I just needed to know I could. I looked up again. Celine was still eating, chatting now with one of the cousins about baby names, as if she hadn't just detonated my life and painted it as a blessing. I stared at her. Not with anger. With recognition. She thought she'd won. She thought I'd walk away tonight with my head down, and she'd get to keep everything, my husband, my seat at the table, my silence. But I wasn't leaving quietly. I wasn't leaving at all. My finger hovered above the folder named Proof, the glow from the phone lighting the corner of the table. I could feel the weight of every unread truth sitting in that tiny rectangle of glass. The chatter at the table faded into a low hum. I slipped the phone into my lap, pushed my chair back quietly, and stood. No one stopped me this time. Celine was talking about cravings, Vera nodding along like nothing was wrong. I left the room and stepped out to the back patio. The night had grown thick and heavy. The hum of crickets filled the silence my family left behind. I leaned against the porch railing and drew a long breath, letting the air cool the heat under my skin. I unlocked my phone again, not to open Proof, but another folder I hadn't touched in years, one labeled Receipts They Forgot. The first image that appeared was a picture of a birthday card, one I'd written by hand a few years ago. It was for Mom, Vera. Her birthday had fallen in the middle of a tough year. I'd written that letter late at night, sitting at my kitchen counter with a cup of cold coffee, trying to find the right words. I told her how grateful I was for how she raised me, how I hoped she'd finally slow down, how I wanted her to feel proud of what she'd built, of us. I'd tucked in a small gift card, a note saying, "You've given enough. Let me give you this." She never mentioned it. Not a thank you text, not a phone call, not even a passing word at the next family dinner. The letter had disappeared into her world like everything else I gave, quietly absorbed, never acknowledged. I looked at that image on my screen now, zooming in on my own handwriting. The loop of my signature trembled, hopeful. It hit harder tonight, not because I was angry about the card itself, but because even after all this time, some small part of me had still hoped she might find it one day and remember. That maybe love didn't have to be loud to be seen. The sound of laughter drifted out from the dining room. I could hear Celine's voice floating above the others. I turned back toward the house, the warm yellow light spilling through the window. For a moment, I could see them inside, Theron sitting next to her, his head bent toward her as she talked. My mother leaning in, smiling, the same gentle smile she used to give me. It looked like a picture-perfect family scene. One I used to imagine myself in. I walked back inside slowly, careful not to let the screen door slam. The smell of food hung in the air, now mixed with the faint sweetness of Celine's perfume. I passed the wall that led from the kitchen to the hallway, our family photo wall. It stretched nearly the length of the corridor, lined with framed memories. I had walked past it hundreds of times, but tonight something pulled me to stop. At the center of the wall was a large canvas print from 2 Thanksgivings ago. I'd organized that entire event, sent invitations, planned the menu, even cooked half the dishes when Mom said she was too tired. Everyone had shown up that year, all smiles and laughter. I remembered taking the picture myself, setting up the tripod, running back to adjust the angle before pressing the shutter. But in the framed version hanging here, I wasn't in it. I stared at it for a long time. Celine stood front and center, wearing my favorite cream sweater. Theron's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. Mom stood beside them, smiling proudly. Around them, the cousins, the aunts, the rest of the family, all frozen in their neat arrangement of belonging. And me? Absent. As though I hadn't been there at all. I reached up, touching the edge of the frame, my fingertips tracing the glossy surface. It wasn't a mistake. The crop had been intentional. My head had been right there at the edge in the original. They'd cut me out to make the composition cleaner, Mom had said at the time. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now, the meaning hit me like a slap. They hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen to erase me. I stepped back, looking at the wall again. Every photo told the same story: Celine's graduation, Celine's promotion party, Mom's retirement dinner. And when I did appear, I was always blurred at the edge, half turned away, caught mid-laugh. Never centered. Never claimed. It dawned on me that my family had learned to live comfortably without acknowledging me at all. And I had let them. I walked down the hall to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, then looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were dry. The tears had stopped before they could start. What I felt now wasn't sorrow, it was precision. The realization settled in quietly: nothing I did would ever be enough for people who had already decided I was less. I had spent years chasing approval that was never coming. And the cruelest part: I'd mistaken their indifference for peace. I returned to the dining room, where the conversation had shifted to lighter things: baby showers, names, nursery colors. Celine was laughing again, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. Theron smiled faintly, saying something about paint colors. The sound of silverware clinking against porcelain filled the space between us. I sat back down, calm, silent, watching them. My mother caught my eye briefly but looked away almost immediately, pretending to adjust her napkin. The familiarity of that avoidance made me tired more than angry. Celine was describing baby names now, running through a list she'd clearly rehearsed. I like traditional ones, she said. Names with meaning. Vera nodded, smiling as she poured herself another glass of wine. How about Dorian if it's a boy? The name landed in the room like a sudden gust. My father's name. My breath caught. My hand tightened around my napkin. I didn't speak, I couldn't. That name wasn't theirs to recycle, not after everything. They moved on quickly, laughing, tossing around more ideas as if nothing sacred had been broken. But the sound of my father's name stayed in the air, echoing like the first crack of thunder before a storm. Inside me, something shifted again, not just pain this time, but purpose. They could cut me out of photos, rewrite stories, even steal names from the dead. But they couldn't take what came next. Because this time, I would write the ending myself. The sound of my father's name lingered in the air like smoke. I didn't move right away. My hands rested on the edge of the table, the laughter around me fading into a low, meaningless hum. Celine was still smiling, rolling the stem of her glass between her fingers, pretending she hadn't just taken something sacred and turned it into small talk. I stood slowly, smoothing the skirt of my dress, and walked back toward my seat. No one noticed me sit down again. No one saw how still I'd become. Their conversation carried on, easy and bright, as if the night hadn't already cracked wide open. I unlocked my phone beneath the table, thumb hovering for only a second. Then I tapped send now. It was done. The first phone to vibrate belonged to my mother. She frowned, squinting through her glasses as she read the subject line. What's this? She murmured. Then Theron's phone buzzed, followed by Celine's, and a ripple of sound spread down the table as every adult reached for their devices. I stayed quiet. Celine's laughter faltered. Why are you all checking your phones? She asked lightly, but her tone had lost its warmth. No one answered. Eyes darted from screens to me. The air grew thick. The faint music playing from the kitchen radio seemed suddenly too loud. In that email were attachments, receipts, contracts, screenshots. The truth, catalogued. Bank records showing the mortgage payments I'd made when Mom's house fell behind. Copies of wiring transfers to Theron when his business was drowning. The deed to the family cabin, listing my name under the payments that kept it from foreclosure. Every quiet contribution they'd once dismissed. At the bottom, a single line. You said I never contributed. I never needed you to know, until now. Theron's mouth parted, his face draining of color. Celine glanced at him, then at me, and tried to laugh. So what, you're keeping score now? Her voice trembled just slightly, and that single crack made me stronger. Money doesn't mean love, she added quickly, louder this time, addressing the table like a stage. I met her eyes for the first time that evening. Neither does betrayal. The room froze again. For once, the silence didn't feel like erasure, it felt like power. Theron shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. Poppy, you didn't have to do this. Didn't I? My voice was calm, even gentle. You all were content to pretend I never did anything. I just corrected the record. Vera set her phone down with a sigh, waving her hand in the air as if brushing off a gnat. You didn't need to send that out to everyone, Poppy. It's embarrassing. You've always had a flair for dramatics. That word, dramatics, landed heavier than any insult. She wasn't angry about what I'd revealed. She was angry that I'd interrupted her evening. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who'd raised me to be polite, patient, quiet. The woman who taught me that good daughters don't make noise, they just keep giving. Her cheeks were flushed, and she couldn't meet my eyes. Across the table, my aunt whispered something to her husband. A cousin muttered, "Did you see the amounts?" Another hissed, "It's true, then." Celine leaned back, crossing her arms. You're trying to humiliate me. No, I said, my tone steady. You did that yourself. Theron spoke again, his voice low. This isn't how family handles things. I smiled faintly. You might be surprised how family handles things when they finally stop pretending. He flinched, eyes dropping back to his plate. Vera clapped her hands once, brittle and false. Enough. We're not doing this. Not here, not tonight. Let's just eat. No one reached for their forks. The only sound was the steady tick of the dining room clock. Every second that passed felt like another nail closing a coffin on the version of me they'd once known. Celine broke first. You know what? This is pathetic. You're jealous, Poppy. Always have been. You can't stand that people like me more, so you try to buy your way into importance. I studied her, the way her chin tilted just slightly upward, the same tilt she used when lying. If people like you more, I said softly, why do you work so hard to keep proving it? She blinked, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. The room seemed to lean in. I stood, this time not quietly. You all wanted me to stay small so you could feel big. But I'm done shrinking. Sit down, Vera said quickly, her voice sharp now. You're upsetting everyone. I turned to her. Good. Maybe upset is what this family needs. Her face stiffened. The cousins avoided eye contact. Celine stared at her wine glass as if it could transport her out of the moment. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. My stillness was louder than their noise. I gathered my purse from the chair beside me, slinging it over my shoulder. For a long second, no one moved. Then, as if desperate to reset the mood, my uncle forced a chuckle and said, well, that was something. Celine gave a thin smile. She'll cool off. I'm not angry, I said simply. I'm awake. That got their attention. I looked around the table one last time, each face carefully composed, pretending this wasn't falling apart. I wanted to memorize the scene, not out of nostalgia but as evidence. Then, because the silence had stretched long enough, I reached for my wine glass. The red liquid caught the light, reflecting everything I just destroyed and everything I just reclaimed. I lifted it slightly, my hand steady. "To clarity," I said. The words were soft, almost kind. But they landed like a verdict. No one echoed the toast. No one clinked their glasses. They just watched as I took a slow sip and set it back down. The night outside pressed against the windows, and for the first time, I felt its weight lift off me. I didn't need their acknowledgement anymore. I'd already taken back something far more valuable, the truth. As I placed the empty glass on the table, I knew the dinner was over, even if no one had said it yet. After I raised my glass and whispered, "To clarity," I could feel the shift ripple across the table. It wasn't loud or obvious. Just a tightening of the air, like the way thunder changes the sky before a storm. I placed the glass down, stood slowly, and excused myself. "Where are you going?" Vera asked, her tone half curious, half annoyed. "To play something," I said. My voice sounded calm, almost kind. I walked toward the living room, the soft click of my heels echoing against the hardwood floor. The night outside pressed against the windows, the air inside heavy with unease. I picked up my phone, opened my Bluetooth settings, and connected to the speaker sitting beneath the television. For a moment, the device blinked blue, searching, then paired with a soft chime. Behind me, I heard my uncle chuckle. "Playing DJ now, Poppy." "Something like that," I said. I scrolled down to the recording app, the one I'd renamed Shopping List. I'd been saving it for this moment, though I hadn't known exactly when or how it would come. Until now. I tapped play. At first, just static, soft and harmless. Then a voice filled the room. Celine's voice. "Once she signs the papers, we'll sell the company fast. She'll never notice until it's done." There was laughter in her tone, light and cruel. Then Theron's voice followed, steady and familiar. "She's too trusting. Always has been. She never checks the details. We'll bury her in paperwork." The sound cut deeper than I expected. Hearing it aloud made the betrayal solid, undeniable. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. A cousin let out a small gasp. Someone's fork clinked against a plate. The recording continued. Another clip. Celine again, laughing. "You know, I stayed at their house that night she was out of town. The guilt almost killed me, until I realized she'd never find out. She never asks." More laughter. Theron's this time. "She's good at pretending everything's fine. That's her thing, she'll blame herself before she blames us." A hush fell over the room. The kind of silence that has weight to it. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. Celine's hand trembled as she reached for her phone. "What is this?" Theron shifted, his voice low and sharp. "Poppy, turn that off." I looked at him, then back at the speaker. "No. You wanted to be heard, remember?" The next part was worse. It wasn't even the words, it was the laughter between them. That soft, private sound two people share when they believe they're untouchable. When it stopped, no one spoke. Vera's voice broke the stillness. "Is this real?" she whispered, like she wanted me to tell her it wasn't. An uncle half rose, then sat again. The cousins looked at one another, wide-eyed, waiting for permission to move. Celine's face had lost all color. She pressed her napkin to her lips, then stood abruptly. "You recorded us. That's illegal, Poppy." "Actually," I said evenly, "Texas law allows single-party consent." Her mouth opened, closed. Theron muttered something under his breath and reached for the phone in my hand. I stepped back before he could touch me. Don't, I said quietly. You've said enough. For a moment, all I heard was the sound of my own heartbeat. Then I turned to face the room. You thought my silence meant I didn't know. It meant I was preparing. My voice didn't rise, but it filled the space. I turned to Celine. You didn't steal my husband. You exposed his worth. Her jaw tightened. Then to Vera, and you didn't lose a daughter tonight. You never made room for one. She flinched, her eyes glossy. Celine grabbed a tissue, dabbing her eyes dramatically. You're destroying this family. No, I said, you did that. I'm just shining the light. Theron's hands were clenched at his sides. You're humiliating us. Good, I said. Now you know how it feels. No one dared move. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Celine looked around the table, seeking sympathy, but found none. Her mask was slipping, the charm that had always saved her cracking under the weight of her own words. You're twisting things, she said. We were angry. We said things we didn't mean. I smiled slightly. Oh, I think you meant every word. That's why you laughed. Theron tried again. Poppy, please. We can talk about this privately. I turned to him, tilting my head. You mean the way you two talked privately about how to erase me? He shut his mouth. My mother looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice small. Would you have believed me? I asked. She didn't answer. For years, I'd swallowed slights, excuses, moments that didn't add up. I taught myself that peace was worth more than pride. But peace without respect isn't peace, it's silence mistaken for virtue. I looked around the table again. I'm not here to make you believe me, I said. I just wanted you to hear yourselves. Celine's voice echoed from the speaker again. She'll never see it coming. That laugh followed, hollow now that everyone knew what it meant. I hit pause. The sound stopped mid-laugh, leaving the room suspended in thick quiet. I looked up, meeting each gaze one by one. And yet, I said softly, here we are. For a long second, no one breathed. Then I unplugged the phone, placed it neatly on the table, and walked toward the door. My hand brushed against the wall where that family photo still hung, the one where I'd been cropped out. Not anymore, I thought. Not after tonight. When I said, and yet, here we are, the room stayed frozen. It felt like no one dared breathe. The recording had stripped away all their excuses, all their pretended innocence, and left only the truth hanging between us. Celine's laugh still echoed faintly from the speaker before it went quiet. Then, like a light switch flipped, the chaos began. Celine shot up from her chair. That's not me, she insisted, her voice higher than usual, trembling with false outrage. You edited that, those aren't my words. Theron pushed back from the table, his hand rubbing the back of his neck. You recorded us without permission, Poppy. This is ridiculous. You're twisting things. Vera pressed a hand to her chest, her tone sharp. Maybe it was taken out of context. You don't really know how things sound when emotions are high. Their words blurred together like noise, a desperate chorus trying to rewrite what everyone had just heard. I waited for a few seconds, long enough for the noise to crest, then fade. I picked up my phone again, scrolled through my email, and said, very quietly, if anyone needs context, check your inbox. For a moment, there was confusion. Then the familiar buzz of phones vibrated across the table. One by one, screens lit up. Celine's. Theron's. Vera's. Even my aunt and cousins. The sound of tapping filled the air as they opened the new message. It was from Jalen, my lawyer. Subject line, forgery confirmation, signed under duress. Silence again, but this time sharper, heavier. I watched Vera's expression shift as her eyes scanned the first few lines. Theron's phone slipped slightly in his hand. What is this? He muttered. Celine reached over, reading over his shoulder, her face draining of color as she scrolled. The email was simple and clear, an official analysis proving that the signatures on several financial documents, ones Theron had submitted, were not mine. Attached were comparison scans and a statement from a bank officer confirming that he'd come in claiming to act on my behalf. My husband had tried to transfer our joint business assets into his name. Theron's voice cracked. That's not true. Jalen's lying for you. I folded my arms. Jalen doesn't lie. He sends proof. The proof was in the attachments, timestamps, witness statements, even a recorded call between Theron and the banker where he said, "She trusts me with everything." I let the words hang there. Celine found her voice first. You can't just throw accusations like that, she said, standing again. Her face flushed, her hands shaking. You're tearing this family apart. No, I said, meeting her eyes. You did that when you decided loyalty was optional. Across the table, Vera exhaled heavily. Enough. This is getting out of hand. She rubbed her temple. Theron made a mistake. People make mistakes. Let's not turn this into some witch hunt. I turned toward her slowly. You call forgery a mistake? Her jaw tightened. She didn't answer. I took a step closer to the table. Do you know what it feels like to have the person you built your life with, the sister you trusted most, sit in the same room plotting how to erase you? No one answered. The quiet stretched until it broke with Vera's soft, pleading voice. Celine, at least tell me the baby is really his. The air snapped. Celine's shoulders stiffened. It doesn't matter now, she said quickly. Vera's eyes widened. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Celine looked away. Her silence said everything. One of the guests, an old family friend, shifted in her seat and frowned. Wait, she said hesitantly, I thought you told Caleb, you know, the investor, that the baby was his. The room went still. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to vanish. Celine's mouth opened, closed. It's complicated. I felt my pulse slow, steady. So even that wasn't real. Celine's face twisted. You don't understand. Caleb was just. No, I interrupted. You don't get to justify lies. Not anymore. Theron sank back into his chair, head in his hands. This can't be happening. Oh, it's happening, I said, my voice calm. You both built this. Brick by brick. Celine turned to Vera desperately. Mom, please say something. Vera looked between us, lost for words. I don't even know what's true anymore, she whispered. That's the first honest thing anyone said tonight, I said quietly. I walked around the table slowly, letting my words land. I came here thinking I might leave with a little dignity. Maybe even forgiveness. But now, I see there's nothing left to save. I stopped beside Vera's chair. You asked me once why I never spoke up. I gestured around the table, at the scattered phones, at their guilty faces, this is why. Because when I do, you call it drama. You call it ungrateful. You call it trouble. Then I turned to Theron. He didn't look up. This was never about love, I said. You wanted control. You wanted to own everything I helped build. You tried to erase me from my own life. His jaw tightened. That's not true. Then prove it, I said softly. He didn't. The silence that followed was final. Heavy. Like the end of a sermon where no one dares clap. I reached for my handbag sitting on the counter. Every eye followed me. The soft sound of the zipper opening echoed through the room. I pulled out a thick manila folder, edges worn, corners creased from being carried for months. I placed it on the table, right in front of Theron. This, I said, is everything you ever signed. Every deal. Every account. Every promise. And everything I never forgot. I didn't look back. My heels clicked softly on the tile as I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard someone whisper my name, but I didn't turn. The house that had once felt like a cage now felt like a courtroom, and I had finally delivered my verdict. I stepped outside into the cool night air. The quiet of the street was almost kind. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the freedom that came after truth. Then I started walking, leaving their voices behind, knowing I would never come back to that table again. I left the folder on the table like a verdict and turned toward the door. I could already feel the air cooling on my face, a mix of relief and exhaustion pulling me forward. But before I reached the hallway, Celine's voice cracked behind me. "Wait," she cried out. "Please, don't go. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." I turned slightly, just enough to see her collapse to her knees in the middle of the living room. She was shaking, her hands pressed to her face. The room stirred with uneasy movement. My mother gasped softly and rushed to her side, kneeling beside her like a scene out of a soap opera. Celine's sobs came out loud, almost theatrical. "I've been depressed. I've been anxious for months, I didn't know what I was doing," she cried. "Theron made me believe things that weren't true. I was sick, Poppy, I swear." Her words echoed off the walls. Some of the relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My aunt whispered, "She needs help." Vera wrapped her arm around Celine, smoothing her hair like she was a frightened child. "She's been through so much," my mother murmured. "We should be careful how we judge." Judge. That word stuck in my throat like a thorn. I turned fully then, my heels clicking softly against the floor as I walked back into the living room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "You're right," I said quietly. "We should be careful how we judge. Especially when people pretend to be broken just to avoid being accountable." Celine lifted her face from her hands, mascara streaked, eyes red. "You think I'm pretending?" she said, voice trembling. "I'm falling apart." I looked down at her. "You always fall apart when someone catches you lying." I unlocked my phone, scrolled for a second, and hit play. From the small speaker, her voice filled the room again, not from the dinner, but from a voicemail she'd left me accidentally a month ago. Her tone on the recording was smooth, confident, even amused. "They'll eat it up," she'd said. "All I have to do is cry and act broken. No one ever questions the girl who says she's struggling." The silence that followed was brutal. You could almost hear the air leave the room. Celine's sobs cut off instantly. Her eyes widened in shock. "That's not, I didn't mean." "You didn't just lie," I said softly, cutting her off. "You weaponized pain. You used people's compassion like a shield." Vera stood slowly, her hand trembling on the arm of the chair. "She's still your sister," she said, her voice shaking but defensive. "Don't turn this into something it's not." Before I could respond, my cousin Megan spoke up from the far end of the room. "Actually," she said, hesitating, "there's something you should know." Every head turned toward her. She looked pale, uneasy. "A few weeks ago, Aunt Vera showed me a text on her phone. I didn't mean to pry, but it was from Celine. She told you about the affair, didn't she? You knew. The words hit like a hammer. Vera froze. That's not true, she said quickly, too quickly. Megan looked down at her hands. It was right there on the screen. You said, let's keep it quiet until things calm down. The room tilted. The blood in my ears roared. I took a step closer. You knew. My voice came out steady, too steady. You knew this was happening and you said nothing. Vera's face crumpled. I didn't want to ruin the family, she whispered, tears finally spilling. I thought if it stayed quiet, it would fade away. I stared at her, feeling the weight of every year, every moment I'd trusted her to protect me. You didn't want to ruin the family. My voice cracked, not from weakness, but disbelief. You let them ruin me instead. No one moved. The sound of my mother's crying filled the space between us, small and pathetic. I stepped back, gathering myself. You've all been talking about brokenness tonight, I said, looking around the room. But none of you were broken, you were comfortable. You let things rot because the smell didn't reach you. Celine tried to speak again, but the room no longer belonged to her. I turned my attention to everyone else. You want to know what I gave this family? I said. Everything. My time, my money, my peace. Every time someone needed help, I showed up. Every time someone lied, I stayed quiet to keep the peace. And all of you, I gestured around the room, fed on that silence. You told yourselves I was strong enough to take it, so you didn't have to feel guilty. No one looked at me now. Not one of them. My voice dropped lower. This family didn't fall apart tonight. It collapsed years ago. You just didn't hear it until now. The words hung heavy in the air. It wasn't anger that filled me, it was release. A cold, steady clarity that came from realizing there was nothing left to lose. Celine sat down hard on the couch, her hands shaking. Vera covered her face with both palms, crying softly. The cousins avoided eye contact, some shifting toward the door. I didn't shout, didn't throw anything, didn't demand an apology. I simply let the silence do what it always does, show the truth. After a long pause, I walked to the doorway. My coat hung there, and I took it from the hook. As I slipped it on, the sound of my mother's sobs followed me like a weak echo. I turned back one last time. Celine was trembling, not from guilt, but from exposure. Vera looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, lost in the wreckage she'd helped build. I opened the front door. The cold night air rushed in, cutting through the heat and noise of that house. Without looking back, I said the words that had been forming in my chest all evening. It's time the storm had a name. And then I walked out. The front door shut behind me, but the weight of what I had said lingered like a thundercloud that refused to drift away. The street was still, the kind of early morning quiet that only exists after a long night of noise. I stood in the driveway, letting the cold hit my skin. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. By dawn, I had packed what I needed. Not to run, but to return. Just after 9 the next morning, I parked in the same spot as the night before, right in front of Vera's house. The air was thick with Texas heat again, but this time, I didn't sweat. I walked in without knocking. No one stopped me. The house was still. No clinking plates, no fake laughter, no one trying to cover the cracks in their foundation with small talk. Most of them had stayed the night, too stunned or ashamed to go anywhere. I found them scattered around the living room, sitting in silence. I carried a small, leather-bound box under one arm. I walked past the living room, straight to the dining table where everything had unraveled. I set the box down gently in the center. The sound echoed. This, I said, meeting each pair of eyes one by one, was my father's final word. You all forgot I was his daughter too. Nobody spoke. I opened the box, pulled out a flash drive, and walked over to the television. A few buttons later, the screen lit up. The video began with the creak of a wooden porch chair, the soft chirp of birds in the background. And then, his voice. Dorian. My father. He looked tired in the video, older than I remembered. But his eyes were clear, his tone unwavering. If you're watching this, he began, then the family I tried to hold together has finally come apart. Not because I failed, but because I waited too long to call things what they were. The room was dead silent. Celine, he continued, I saw the way you changed. The way you moved like the world owed you. And Theron, son, if you'd ever treated Poppy with the respect she gave you, I might have left something for you too. But you lost my respect long before you lost your way. Theron dropped his gaze to the floor. Then Dad leaned forward slightly, his voice gentler. And Poppy, my quiet storm. You were never the loudest, but you were always the one who held us all together. Everything I've built, my name, my land, my company, it's yours now. You'll know what to do with it. I turned off the TV. The room stayed still. Then I pulled out the second item from the box, a sealed envelope. I opened it and removed the contents, a notarized will, updated 6 months before he passed. I laid it flat on the table, letting them see the words for themselves. The business. The family property. The foundation accounts. All in my name. And before anyone says a word, I added, a backup copy is with the lawyer. Jalen sent it to everyone listed in the document. Including you, Mom. Vera's face had gone pale. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. He didn't forget me, I said. You did. Celine stood up abruptly. This is outrageous, she snapped. You manipulated him. You got in his ear while he was sick. I looked at her. You really think he didn't see you for who you are? She faltered. He always loved me. Loved you enough to leave you nothing. Theron rose, his voice shaking. Poppy, I didn't mean for things to go this far. I was scared. I messed up. Can't we just move on from this? Move on. I repeated. You tried to erase me on paper. Now you want to erase the consequences too. He stepped toward me. Look, I know I failed you. But we were married for a reason. That has to count for something. It does, I said. It counts as proof that I gave you everything, and you threw it away. He stood there, helpless. For once, no one stepped in to rescue him. From the corner of the room, my cousin Clara, who'd always defended Celine, spoke up softly. You played the wrong hand too long. Celine turned toward her in shock. You were on my side. Clara shrugged. I was on the side of truth. And you buried that a long time ago. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth was its own punishment. I gathered the documents carefully, placed them back in the box, and latched it closed. I was halfway to the door when Vera spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. Do you hate me? I turned, looked her in the eyes. No, I said. I don't hate you. But I can't carry you anymore. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't wait to see Vera's face crumble. I closed the door gently behind me and stepped into the soft hush of early evening. The sky was that deep, indigo blue that only shows up after something inside you breaks and begins to rebuild. I walked to my car without looking back. No more explanations. No more performances. That night, I returned to my apartment, a place that had once felt like an echo chamber but now felt like sanctuary. I hung my coat, removed my shoes, and let silence settle over me like a blanket. But this silence was different. It wasn't heavy or accusing. It didn't whisper shame or failure. It just was. I made tea, sat on the couch, and exhaled fully for the first time in what felt like years. My phone buzzed several times on the coffee table, but I ignored it. I didn't need more words from people who had already shown me how little theirs were worth. Morning crept in slowly. I didn't rush to start the day. Instead, I walked to my bookshelf, my fingers brushing against worn spines. One title caught my eye, the one Dad gave me when I moved into my first apartment. Still Waters. I pulled it down, sat cross-legged on the floor, and opened the front cover. Tucked between the pages was a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges and soft from years of hiding. My heart caught in my throat. I unfolded it carefully. It was his handwriting. Poppy. If they ever try to take your voice, remember, it was never theirs to hold. You've always had more power than they wanted you to realize. You listen when others talk, and because of that, you understand more than they ever will. That's not weakness. That's strength. I know you don't like the spotlight. That's okay. Not every storm has to be loud. Some change the world just by arriving. Whatever happens after I'm gone, don't let them rewrite you. Love. Dad. Tears didn't fall, not this time. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was steady. Solid. The kind that doesn't need an audience. I folded the letter and tucked it back into the book. I had no need to return calls or respond to the texts Vera had sent. A month passed. A birthday card arrived in the mail, Vera's cursive on the envelope. I placed it in the drawer next to old warranties and appliance manuals. I didn't tear it up. I didn't read it either. Some things didn't need dramatic endings. They just needed endings. Instead, I turned my energy towards something new. The lot I bought downtown was overgrown and forgotten, tucked between an old bakery and a tax office. But it had potential, like people who've been overlooked for too long. The sign went up 3 months later, Dorian House. No grand opening, no ribbon cutting. Just a small plaque by the door that read, "For women rebuilding what no one else saw them lose." Inside, the walls were soft shades of sage and ivory. No portraits, no family photos. Just light. Gentle, steady light. We offered art therapy, financial literacy workshops, and the kind of quiet support no one boasts about online. There were no sob stories shared for clicks, only women sitting in soft chairs, relearning how to speak without trembling. One day, after a class on self-advocacy, a woman about my age approached me. Her voice shook as she said, "I don't know why, but this place feels like it knew what I needed before I even asked." I smiled. That's how it's supposed to feel. She looked around. You don't talk much. But somehow, the room does. I nodded, thinking of the women who had been told they were too emotional, too quiet, too much, or never enough. Sometimes the loudest healing comes in the quietest places. That evening, after everyone had left, I walked through the halls alone. The floors creaked softly beneath my feet. I paused in the back corridor where sunlight filtered through frosted glass, touching everything in gold. I ran my fingers along the smooth wood of the doorframe, then whispered, more to myself than to the empty room. They thought silence meant weakness. But the storm was always mine. In the end, this story wasn't just about betrayal, it was about reclaiming power through truth and quiet strength. Sometimes, the loudest revenge isn't yelling or chaos, it's clarity. So ask yourself, If your silence has been mistaken for weakness, what truth are you holding that could set you free? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful,